Welcome back to Live With, brought to you by Species Nutrition. Visit speciesnutrition.com. I'm Dave Palumbo. Today's guest is a good friend of mine. You guys know him as the Future, and the man I'm talking about, Jimmy Quinn. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dave.
Jimmy, we haven't chatted for a while. I think we had you on I think you came down to my studio in New York a couple times, and we had you on the show. But I wanted to get you here. I've been doing a lot of retrospectives on bodybuilders of the 90s and just getting their mindset, what it was like, the environment, because everyone talks about the 90s as being kind of like the renaissance of bodybuilding, the heyday, so to speak. And you were kind of right in the midst of it. You were one of the mass monsters out there that kind of changed the scope of bodybuilding probably forever. It went from like the Haney era to the Dorian, Ronnie era. Jimmy, give us a little background. A lot of people might not know who you are or where you came from. You played professional football and transferred kind of that over to bodybuilding. Give us the whole synthesis of how that happened.
Well, this is my alma mater. I got recruited out of Long Island. You're in our home base, and I went up and played for 4 years up there. And I got drafted really low, Dave. We did have a third round and a sixth round guy. One went to the Lions, one went to the Tampa Bay Bucks. Two good friends of mine, two great lifters, by the way. And then I went free agent. The thing with Dallas was a little bit overplayed. So I did get to camp. I got into a preseason scrimmage with the Rams rookies, and I had a really bad headbutt. And I compressed some disc in my neck and my lower back on the same hit. It was going to happen regardless. That was explained to me later by a neurosurgeon. And that's what ended it. It was very short-lived.
Right.
But, I look back on, I still follow my alma mater. And the 4 years I played at New Hampshire were phenomenal. Really, the bodybuilding, I come back to Long Island and I got a bum back, a bum vertebra, cervical and lumbar. And, pretty traumatic hit, did some damage. And I went back to Rab's Health Club and started training with our good friend, Jimmy Plecci, the Iron Bull, and pretty much rehabbed. And then somebody in the gym, a guy named Tony Antorino, he was a Mr. Florida. And he had a really good symmetrical physique, something that I certainly wasn't born with. It's just the nicest guy. And he goes, I'll teach how to pose, and why don't you go into a show? And I did the Met, the first show, did good, and I just pressed on and wanted to get that pro card eventually.
Let me stop you for a second, Jimmy. When you were playing football in New Hampshire, obviously at the college level, when you went to that training camp with the pros, what was the difference? The level of play, the level of aggression, the level of strength, playing on a college field to a pro field? I mean, what was it like? Was it a shock to you, the level of skill?
Dave, a great question. I would say from high school to college, growing up in Suffolk County, I would say it was from, second gear to third gear. And then the analogy I would say from college, 1AA, not one, to pros was from third gear to fifth gear.
Wow.
And it was, Dave, it was amazing. The first 4 days in mini camp, everybody was just 20 or 30 pounds bigger. Everybody was just so much nastier.
Right.
Everybody was a hitter, where in college there were like 3 guys on a team that was a hitter.
Right.
And it was dog eat dog. It was fighting for a job, not for who was going to get attention from the cheerleaders. Different onus. And I'll tell you, the story I remember was in camp, in mini camp for the rookies, and we had helmets on and didn't have shoulder pads. We had helmets and jerseys, no pads. And the receivers started coming over the middle. These were first and second year guys, all rookies as well. And they started flipping the guys on their head. I mean, these guys were going up passes, and the safeties and the D-backs were dumping them on their head. And we all looked at each other. We went back to the huddle, and we said, this is a war. All right, this isn't playtime anymore. Right. And you have to just up your game at that moment. I think I got somebody grabbed my face mask the next play. I got into a fight with them.
Right.
He got to the Giants. Yeah, I mean, it was wicked. It was a war. It was an amazing transition. Great question.
Did you were you happy almost to get? Was it a relief for you to leave and get out of that whole scene?
To the T. At that, you know what had happened, Dave? They came and took me to lunch at a bar that I bounced at in downtown in Huntington.
Yeah.
I was a late free agent, and I only had 3 teams interested in me at that point.
Yeah.
And I really had started bodybuilding, and I was doing chemicals, which at that point weren't illegal in the NFL, by the way.
Right.
And it was kind of prevalent. And so I wanted to continue to bodybuilding, do bodybuilding. So in the middle of it, they come and they offered me a free agent contract, and I really had like 1 foot in the door and 1 foot back in Long Island where I wanted to continue to bodybuild.
Sure.
So when I got hurt, and I got kind of significantly hurt, specifically with the cervical and the lumbar spine. That was they gave me kind of an ultimatum. Usually with rookies, they'll give you the first day, the second day. The third day, you get a flight home. Literally, that's how it is.
Yeah.
And you know that, I don't know if you know the show Hard Knocks.
Yeah, sure.
You know what that means?
No.
Yeah, everybody thinks hard knocks like hitting knocks.
Yeah.
It's not. It's when they knock on your door. So we're in a dorm out in the valley of California. That's when the camp was way out. And you hear these knocks coming down the hallway, and you had 4 or 5 roommates, and you didn't know who it was, but whoever hard knock meant, get your stuff, here's your ticket, you're going home.
Did you get a hard knock, I assume, huh?
Knocks means, yeah. She get a hard knock. I got a hard head knock, and I was sent home anyway.
Oh, my God. So you go back home, you start bodybuilding, obviously. And what was the typical like cycles back when you were training, to before you got your pro card?
Meaning, numbers.
Yeah, what were you guys taking back then? Because this was what, the mid '80s?
The big '80s. Well, I'll tell you. I'll remind you of something. You'll laugh. Remember, rugby was one of the big pharmaceutical companies.
Sure.
We're in our backyard in Long Island.
Yeah.
So I think everybody started with D-ball. I think everybody, that was their starter kit.
Uh-huh.
So available, and it wasn't illegal really. Maybe it was a misdemeanor at that point.
Yeah.
And so I think everybody started with that, and you got moon face, and you got bloated, and your bench went up 40 or 50 pounds, and you got hungry. And then really what it transitioned into was T&D. Let's be frank and honest.
Yeah.
It was taking exogenous testosterone and then nandrolone.
Right.
Honestly, I was like you. I mean, you're an academic, and I've always been lucky to have you on my side. The viewers should know I text you and you get back to me within an hour, 2 hours. I always send Dave, these questions, whether they're chemical oriented or something with a client or something else, and I always get an honest, blunt answer.
Sure.
Look, a Long Islander. But it was, I think we were of the ilk of the conversations you've had with Dorian, where we kept it pretty low, even though that was contrary to what people believed, with the vascularity and the strength that us guys had. It was 400 of everything. Anything that was an oil base, we never did over 4. Once in a while, you push it at 5.
Right.
And, with that, you didn't get contraindications. You didn't get the damn gyno. And,
right.
And the back acne and the bad attitude, and we had one anyway to start with.
Yeah, but Jimmy, the funny thing was, you guys thought you were using a lot of shit back then, probably, right?
You're right. I remember the first time I
probably
went out.
Other guys were saying Jimmy's out of his mind. He's shooting all this stuff, 400 milligrams. What is he, crazy?
Meanwhile, that was probably the prevailing amount.
Yeah.
And I saw one of your interviews with Dorian, which I love. How honest and blunt that human being is. And what did he say? He said that he actually told me when I asked him one day, we had some blunt conversations. We laughed for we're using 1/4, 1/5 of what everybody else is using. and we're just twice as big because we were meant to be DNA.
Right.
Secondly, because we didn't need it. There's a point of diminishing return.
Yeah, you train like an animal though in the gym too. You guys, the Palechias, you guys were lifting insane amounts of weights back then.
Yeah. I'll tell you a funny story. Somebody asked me about it. So we trained at Bev's a lot. And of course, me and Jimmy could have been way more diplomatic with Steve. And we the corner office, we would walk in, bypass the office. Come in. We were doing lateral raises seated. Remember, with 150s, we were doing dumbbell kickbacks with 150, where nobody thought about using that big dumbbell for that. An isolationary single joint exercise. Yeah. And we drop him on the ground. Poor Steve would come out of the office and he'd walk over and he'd go, "Will you guys just not break my gym?" We just gotta reflect, like, it's heavy. We're tired. We're dropping it. But, I actually, the last time I saw him, I apologized for how rude we were when we trained at his gym. And we laughed about it.
Pelletier got kicked out of more gyms than any bodybuilder I know because he would break everything in the gym. And he would scream. Remember, he would scream between every rep,
Yeah. You mean,
right?
Yeah. I mean, the things that human being did, there's powerlifters, there's strong men, there's strong bodybuilders. I think Jimmy, pound for pound, movement for movement, and I mean multi-joint, single joint, whatever it was.
Yeah.
I think he's the strongest human being I've ever witnessed. And Chris Confessori was a regular in our gym. Right. God bless his soul, made the greatest bench presser of all time. Yeah. I know Eddie Cohn. Jimmy, in terms of every body part, every movement, even his legs, Davey.
They were strong, yeah.
I would call him up on leg day, and I would get on the phone at 8. I'd have to get a jump on him.
Yeah.
And sure enough, he'd be gone. He'd get out.
No leg day for him, yeah.
He was hiding from me because he was a martial artist, and he didn't really want to train his legs and slow down.
Right.
But, God is my judge. If that guy, he would put on 11 plates after never doing legs.
Right.
11 plates on his side for, 15.
He'd keep up with you. Yeah, he'd keep up with you.
And that's why I turned pro. I mean, I've told him that many, many times. The only reason why I won the North American, got my pro card, wasn't because I was pretty. It wasn't because of a frontable bicep.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a fullback that was dieting for a bodybuilding contest on occasion. It was basically from training with him. I came home and I bombed. I think I was 7th in the 89 Nationals. First time I ever missed the top 5.
Right.
And he said, "Let's get as big and as strong as we possibly can." And he goes, F it. Let the cards fall where they may, but get so big that they have to acknowledge you. Right. And it worked.
Were you, at that point, was there growth hormone around? Were you guys using that at that point in time?
You know what? It was just it was just coming in 1990. That's when it surfaced, at least in the East Coast.
Yeah.
And by 91, 92, the WBF years, it was prevalent. It was accessible, we'll call it.
Right.
It was part of the protocol. But in 90, yes, leading up into that, into those 3 pro qualifiers. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, because you were pretty. That's when you really got really freaky looking, I think, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know this stuff better than I do. You're the doctor. But I was an intern or a physician.
Intern.
I would at least read the inserts and get a Dorlands and figure out what the words meant. But it was just something that was added in, that your body had, gotten immune to those same 4, 5, 6, or 7, and just the newness. A different, a pituitary hormone that people just blew up to the second level. And then, of course, that happened with insulin in 94, 95.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And I did that once, and man, it was not a good experience. And I became so hypoglycemic, and thank God for protein bars within my grasp. And I never did it again.
No. Back when you had turned pro, I know Ed Connors had told me the story that he had wanted you. I think he wanted you to go into WWF, didn't he?
He did, and Shane had asked me.
McMahon.
And Shane said, anytime you want to, let me know. And there was some talk of me being like Hellwig's brother, meaning the Ultimate Warrior's brother, because we look a lot alike.
Sure.
And I had longer hair, and me and Jimmy were friends. Jim was a good bodybuilder, actually. He was 4th, I think, in the USA at one point.
Right.
So, yeah, it was an open door. And you know what, Dave, after playing pretty good college football and then having, made an attempt at the NFL, I just, didn't want to go that route. And I, be honest with you, I didn't know whether my body and my neck and my spine, it's amazing. You can do very basic compound multi-joint heavy movements. And as long as you have good form and, higher rep, you can get away with it. But then when you start moving around like that with big human beings, you might as well get back on the field with a helmet on.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Because, I'm sure the money had to be tempting, Jimmy, because at the time you weren't making a fortune.
No. And, that's a great point. None of us were. So, and that was a little bit of the allure of going to defecting to the WBF. And, 91, 92 was a salary, a multi-billion-dollar company.
Yeah, talk about, Jimmy, just take us back a minute. How did that, we know that Vince McMahon in 91 decided to start that WBF organization where he was going to be like a wrestling bodybuilding amalgam. He took a lot of bodybuilders went over to him. Tom Platz was kind of the athlete rep, and they brought Gary Stridham, Troy Zucolato, the whole crew, Barry DeMay. How did they court you on that one? Well, who approached you first, and how did that come about?
Tom did. Yeah, Tom was the athlete rep, and Tom's. I don't know if you've gotten to know Tom personally.
Yeah, sure, I know.
Guy, very intelligent. I think he has his master's degree before he even started bodybuilding. I think from Michigan State. Very smart. And we sat down at the what was the Rose Cafe, I think.
Yeah.
And Dennis. He started telling me about this entity, and I'd heard a little bit from Ed Connors, who was a good friend, and we had owned some gyms already at that point, some gold gyms, and I listened to him. It was tough. It was so it was Tom that initially opened the conversation, and then you went up to the corporate office and you negotiated, so to speak, with Vince and Linda, and I did. But it was a tough. I just turned pro. So did Aaron Baker. So, we kind of wanted, to get a shot at competing in the IFBB and qualifying for the Olympia, and now you're defecting. It was tough. It was tough. Right off the bat, a couple months later, you're becoming a defector, and going so against the grain. It was a tough decision, but I made it. I went that one direction, and you know what, Dave? In retrospect, who's kidding who? I tell people I probably have the worst genetics that became an IFBB pro. I needed a helmet on and a double neck roll, and I was going to hit your head. I was going to hit you in the head, but when it came to bodybuilding, the DNA and the bone structures just were incredibly limited.
You had the freaky mass that everyone loved back then. Jimmy, what did you make? What did they offer you? What were you making with the WBF?
What did you compete at? 265?
One show I did I was 280, because I wanted to see how far I could push it. But I always did better around 265. Yeah.
You actually did better the time that I told you to do some conditioning.
Yeah, exactly.
You fought me, and I kept pounding you I said, Dave, do some cardio.
You did. You talked me into it. Yeah.
I thought you did better. You just ran. That was the difference between becoming an IFBB pro then was, Troy Zucolato would win, and then John Defendis showed up, and then Johnny Morant won, and then Aaron Baker won, and then I won. There was always so many good guys in the weight class. It was like a pecking order of how many I think Troy had to wait 8 times. I think Aaron waited 7. I went home without a pro card like 7, 8 times.
Because there was too many guys. They didn't give a lot of pro cards. Nowadays, there's so many more opportunities to get that pro card. But getting back to the WF, just out of curiosity, because I had asked Gary this, and I know Gary was the highest paid guy. What were you making a year?
125 for 2 years. So we were all on 2 year. Gary was the only one that was smart enough to negotiate a 3rd year.
Oh, wow. And that was a lot of money back then, Jimmy.
Yeah, it sure was.
And I just had David Dirth on the show recently, and he was saying that they were flying you guys around first class, and you would get limos, and you had to feel important, I guess, working for them.
Yeah, you did. And after the first year show, I think the viewership was like, I don't know, was it 11,000 houses? And you started hearing, is it too limited a scope, this bodybuilding thing?
Yeah.
If you put the 5 best bodybuilders in Grand Central Station and they start posing, is anybody going to know where they are? And are most of the people going to leave going, that's gross?
Yeah.
Was it ever palatable for the general public? Is it just a niche thing? And so, inevitably, for various reasons, other reasons, and I still train Shane McMahon. I'm training him tomorrow morning, so I'm not going to say.
Oh, you do?
Yeah. We've been
That's
banging
awesome.
it. Oh, yeah, he's doing great. But
I think if it happened at a different time, I think it would have been successful.
I agree. I thought the premise was good. I thought the shtick, that really, just playing on everybody's role. I was the future, and Johnny Morant was executioner, and everybody had already had the Flying Dutchman. They already had their persona per the IFBB, and the magazines would play on that. So it was already there, and then to work that in. I mean, I'll tell you one thing. When it first started, and I was living in Playa del Rey, and there was that show, The Body Stars, and they started working that into the WWF telecast. And I remember I went to breakfast. First thing, I went down the road to Manhattan Beach because I didn't cook. Still don't. And there was people recognizing me on the street.
Oh, really?
To me and go, wow, you're I mean, a lot of people.
Really?
So a lot of people were starting to, be aware of it, get exposure to it. And that was the first time I was like, wow, this is weird. Like, you can actually go in public and get noticed significantly instead of, who's the freak? Who's that big guy?
Yeah, people. I gotta have my producer pull some pictures up of you, Jimmy. Jimmy, when you walk down the street, you weren't just big. You would wear these cut-off shirts, tied. You'd have your hair back. I mean, you looked like a lunatic. I mean, you were bigger than life character.
I guess I was. Yeah. The shirt tied up thing, I would get feedback from that. A lot of times not positive, and I'm like, did you ever watch Oklahoma Sooners play football? Well, when you're in camp, it's about 95 degrees, Dave,
right,
and you have a helmet on, and most of the heat's coming off your head.
Yeah.
And a lot of times in those days, you didn't get water breaks.
Yeah.
So we got really used to tying our jerseys up. And that was a D1 football thing.
Right.
And people would comment and give you hell for, what's that? That looks, weird. Other connotations as well. And that's where that was derived from, was playing college ball, where, man, you did everything you could. You'd beg, borrow, and steal to get that helmet off for 5 minutes, 3 minutes.
Yeah, I heard some stories back in the day. Also, some of the fights you had too. It didn't seem like it fared very well for your opponents.
Yeah, you know what? I just wanted to go home and eat and sleep, and I didn't want to get hurt. And if somebody was going to put that in jeopardy, it wasn't going to be fun for him. And, we'd warn him. But I was smart in that I always had a Pelletier.
Right.
There was a kid, Brian Dovchek, who was 6'5", 295. I always had, Gary Sterick had the fastest hands I've ever seen.
Yeah.
The guy behind one of the bartenders, Joe Vedic, was unbelievable. So I wasn't dumb. I always surrounded myself with people that could run, and we would kind of warn him, like, this isn't going to be fun for you.
Right.
It's not just the health end of the week.
I was up in school, as you know. I went to med school up in Westchester, so I heard all the Westchester boys. They seemed to have like a lot of beef with the Long Island guys back at the time. Did you ever run in with an Angelo Vizella back in the day in a club? I did,
and that was a bummer because I knew him beforehand. That's so funny. That story got around, and I met him, I think, at the Nationals. And he said, come sit with my family. I didn't make the cut. He was like 5th or 6th.
Oh.
And it was just, at a bar, Nassau County, somebody hit my friend Glenn Morale with a glass, which is a dirty move. I'm not big. And he hit him in the face. Thank God he just cut him over his eye. and my knee jerk was a right hand, and it just happened to, land pretty good.
You hit Angela? Is that what the story was?
Somebody got in the way of it, We just a knee jerk, and that was the end of that. And we knew the group that we were involved in. Yeah. We were content to just let it go because it could have escalated in a lot worse. Yeah, but poor Glenn got whacked in the face with a glove. It was a dirty move.
And Glenn had went on to buy the Gold's Gym in Belmore here, and owned that, I remember.
He could handle himself. So they're pretty fortunate that they got him in the face with a glass.
Wow.
But that was Long Island, Dave. There was, we look what happened to Dougie Wentz, a very good bodybuilder. Yeah. There was, there's some tough dudes out in Long Island. It's no different in Westchester and Bergen, and so. You had to kind of be on your game, and you just, as a bodybuilder, you didn't want to be bothered. You wanted to eat every 2.5 hours and sit and go home, collect your money. And I got hurt so many times at 2 o'clock in the morning, pulling people up piles, and oh my God. And you flipped because if it was going to affect your training, it could affect the way you wanted to make a living.
Were you there the day that Paletti beat up the whole bar?
I've been in many situations where Paletti beat up.
He's so calm now. You never would believe that he was that nuts back in the day, right?
Yeah, a couple of drinks. I mean, it became the Tasmanian devil, and I mean, not a good drinker. 2 or 3 because Jimmy didn't, and he was always training so hard.
Yeah.
It went right to him. But the funniest one was at a happy hour, Dave, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm sitting there trying to socialize with cute gals, or let's just leave it at that.
Yeah.
And this cop comes in, big guy, Suffolk County. I mean, good shape. He comes in, and I'm talking to somebody, and he goes, Jimmy, frantically. He goes, you got to help us. Paletti is making us look like fools.
Oh,
I'm like, what? Had 3 beers in me already. I'm like, what? He was throwing them around. People said like dominoes, and they hit it. They maced him, and the cop said it didn't even faze him. So I went outside and I said, Jimbo, please let him go, Jimmy. And he was like, oh, okay, Quinny, all right. And that was the end of it. But that's how much of and thank God that they gave us the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, they could have arrested him, sure.
Of course, Jimmy pounded. If ever anybody wanted a bodyguard, he's the guy. I mean, and. The salt. He's the salt of the earth. He's he's the guy that would call you the next day and go, "Hey, my bad." And he would do that.
He'd feel bad. He'd like go and he said he took a kid out to lunch one day that he beat up one day.
Right, and let me tell you that he got me out of me having to do that and dislocating my shoulder or tearing my pec at 2:30 in the morning. I just say, talk to them. I'm the mayor here.
Yeah.
I got to train chest and buys tomorrow. Talk to them.
What made you move out to California originally, Jim?
When I got the pro card, it was just an easy decision, and people told me nothing's going to happen in Long Island, and now that you got your IFBB pro card, you got to go out. And I think I came home from doing some photo shoots after the North America, and within 5 days I said goodbye to my family members in Long Island, and I figured I had to do it.
Yeah, you were there for a long time.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I stayed near Golden Fennis. Never lived near there. Always lived in quiet little towns, and I think that's from growing up in Long Island, you know, and that's what we're comfortable with, Dave. Yeah. And then went down to San Diego because I was involved in the Golds there, and then moved back to Orange County halfway up, worked for Metrex, and then they say you can never go home, but I'm glad for you and your family, your ever-growing family.
Yeah.
It's got an infield now, huh?
Yeah, another one on the way. But you know what? You always worked a real job. I know you worked for Twin Lab and MD for a while on Long Island. You worked for Scott Conley. Matter of fact, you got me in with Metrex. I wanted to work for them. I wanted to be, sponsored by them, and you always kept mentioning to Scott Conley, I have this friend Dave, and And
Right.
eventually, we bumped into each other a couple times, and then I wound up working for them, which was great because it was Jimmy, me, and you all working for Metrics together.
It was like our Huntington, Long Island, our Long Island group just hanging out, and we got paid for it. Yeah, Jimbo got involved. They liked Twin Lab, liked Jimmy as well, and he was on with them for a while. And he was always so good in the booth.
Yeah.
Because he's just such a down-to-earth human being. And, we would do these shticks where we get on the microphone and we just do our, like how we normally talk on Long Island.
Yeah.
And, he was able to parlay that into, a living as well. You're more the entrepreneur, I'm glad for you. And, unfortunately, that's how these guys don't know that. But growing up on Long Island, you're going to get razzed to hell. You know that. The conversation is people ripping you another.
You got to have thick skin. If you can't have thick skin, you never last in the sport.
You cannot. But at the same regard, those are the same guys that make a phone call 2 a.m. They're in the car. They're coming.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. But you know what the funny thing is? You and I didn't have the greatest genetics, but we seem to supersede our genetics with using the science and being knowledgeable and educating ourselves about bodybuilding. And that's what I respected about you, is that you maximized whatever potential you had because you were smart about it and you weren't a dumb bodybuilder. People could look at you and think you were dumb, but you were anything far from that. You were like super intelligent. And I mean, you're still using it today. You're training a lot of people and you make your living from it. I mean, I think really when we got, I don't know if I'm speaking for you, but I think my goal at least was I wanted to make a living from the sport that I really loved. And I think you did too. And pretty much you're still doing it and I'm still doing it today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, probably both of us said, look, you hit a front double by, you hit an aesthetic pose. And if it's just not like, oh my God, then you know what you don't have and you got to maximize what you do. And that was just being mammoth. And with that was just getting as strong as humanly possible. And that's why, honestly, that's what, when I came home from bombing in '89 and I tried to skinny down and get my waist small and, that's not DNA or genetic. No. I mean, people, you got to work on your symmetry. I'm like, you don't understand anthropometry. Symmetry. You can hypertrophy a muscle group, but you're not changing your mom and dad,
right.
And you're not changing your musculoskeletal system. Right. It's already in there. That's like saying, somebody that, works with a performance coach and he runs a 4.9 and you're like, well, we got to get you down to a 4.45.
It's not happening, yeah.
It's got to be there already, yeah.
Another thing that also I think a lot of people should really admire from you is that, people saw the 90s guys as unhealthy, or they saw that the mass monsters, those are the guys that are going to die early. I mean, you were smart. You always watched your health. You're going to be 60 years old next year. We just talked about this a little earlier. And, you're in good health. I mean, what do you attribute that to always, being conscious of that?
You know what I would say I'd attribute to it the most, Dave? Because I was a baseball, football guy. You ran track. I don't know if the viewers know. Were you like a 402?
In what?
In a mile.
I ran the mile, Jimmy, in 4:20. I ran a 4:20 mile. I was really more of a longer distance runner, believe it or not, which I probably shouldn't have been. I just liked the challenge of it. I probably should have been a shorter distance runner, but I didn't like the pain as much, So
800, yeah. But reader, I know the viewers probably don't know that you ran at Franklin and Marshall, and I was a decent center fielder and a running back and eventually fullback. And I think I kept on the cardio. I always, even now, I do the step mill as a workout for the day. Mm-hmm. I'll do 10 bursts. I do a lot of anaerobic stuff. Not too big a fan of all the slow steady that was the prevailing way to condition at that point. And, I guess I kind of, for me, I think what's helped me the most as I age, and I've had some dents and dings, is the anaerobic burst, the HIIT intervals.
Yeah.
And then training, and then continuing to train, and then eating the way, fortunately, maybe that's the best benefit of bodybuilding, that you pulse eat and that you concentrate on lean animal source protein, and you you're constantly keeping your carbs as low as you can,
Yeah.
and fat, and not a bad way to live.
Yeah, well, I mean, you look great. Was it tough for you to downsize when you went from being, 300 pounds to being a mortal man again?
That's another good question, and I'm sure you with 3 now, one more on the way. That when you become a parent, Dave, it has to switch to not you and your selfishness, but more selflessness in terms of I got to be an active, fit parent, and I gotta last the long run here.
Yeah.
And Brady's a lacrosse player, and I got to get out in the cul-de-sac, and I got to cover him. Mom does better. She's way quicker. She's way better athlete. But I'm almost 60, and he's 13.
Wow.
And so I try to tell people that I go make it an onus on being an active parent. So once we had Brady, everything became very easy, and it just became. Forget about me. Forget about walking around with a sleeveless shirt. Nobody wants to look at me.
Yeah.
And forget about how much I bench or flat dumbbell and deadlift, and just endure and stay relatively healthy and mobile. And I do a lot with clients too, a lot of mobility work, a lot of postural restoration. Mm-hmm. I've seen Dorian do a lot of that, a lot of yoga, and I'm like, as heavy as that human being trained, he's fine because he's keeping his mobility. And all that stuff. You guys are doing yoga. You know what? Whatever way you look at it, that's the way that it's gone. Is mobility, restoration of posture, and it's really saved me.
What do you do for posture, for restoration of posture?
There's a lot of people to follow. I follow a guy named Peter Gosku, who was it. He was the guy in the mid to early 90s, EGOSCUE. And it's funny, Dave, the newer posture guys, I see you extending your head.
No, I'm trying to stretch I'm getting posture. I'm feeling like I'm slumping too much. Explain what that means, what that restoration of posture is.
Great question. So when I look at a human being, I'm looking at whether their ear is in a direct line with their AC joint. Is their head translated? Mm-hmm. Well, what does that mean? That means that it's a combination of flexion and extension. And how is that happening? That's happening?
Aging?
Cell phones.
Oh, wow.
Cell phones are keeping chiropractors in business. They call it tech head. And then you're looking at shoulders. Do you have upper torso rotation? Is one shoulder higher than the other? If you find
I have that. What do you recommend doing for that?
Upper spinal forward twist, face down swim, flexion, external rotation, a combination. A lot of scap retract, doing it evenly. We do a gripless. There's ways of improving it. I mean, you and I have some neurological things, and when the nervous system gets turned off and you lose innervation, then sometimes the lights don't turn back on. I know you've dealt with that. I've had to deal with it as well. But there's downward dog as a basic yoga movement. Let's see a bodybuilder, a big, thick, immobile off-season bodybuilder, do one of those and hold it for 30 seconds.
Right. What is that? What movement is that? The downward dog.
That's just making a rectangle, how we were born. So when you look at a human being, your 4 levels of 90-degree sockets. Your GH joint, your hip socket, your knee socket, and your ankle joint.
Right.
And so you basically should be bilaterally 4 90-degree angles of ball and socket in a row, and everybody's a little bit off. It's very rare that you find somebody that's not completely symmetrical.
Right. Interesting.
And corrective exercise, dumbbells are always going to be the best implement because they allow for a dysymmetry. They allow for a dominant side on an athlete, and usually the dominant side is going to be more developed.
Right.
It's really interesting stuff. And if you read a guy like him, you're going to get on the floor and you're going to start doing it. And Dave, I started doing it, and God bless Ronnie. I mean, we've all seen that piece on him, and and the daughters, the 2 adorable daughters, and they were skating, and then it's like, wow. I know you've run into some issues yourself. I've had I've had a bunch of them. I've had 20 orthopedic surgeries.
What have you had done?
Hip replacement, fusion in the front. The fusion failed. They went in the back, and they actually put some wiring. It looks like I have a coat hanger on two of my 2-level C4, C5 of my spinous processing. It's the weirdest thing. It looked at you. I went there on a checkup, and one of the doctors said, "I've never seen anybody have that. I don't know what to do with that." He said, "Go back to the guy that put it on there." I've had, AC separations from football, full elbows. I've had a lot, but I'm okay, and I function pretty good, and I can move really well, and there's not too much that I can't do.
Sure.
And I attribute the most of it to this Agosco, and then you add things in. I follow a bunch of really good guys on Instagram. You got to be careful who you watch and who you follow. But like a guy like Tony Gentlecore, brilliant guy, and you learn something from him every week. There's other guys, but I heard him speak at an NSCA conference for on a Friday and a Saturday, and it just like, oh my God, this guy's really sharp, So
do you implement a lot of these things with your clients that you work with?
Every time that I go at a conference, every time that I see something on Instagram that following the right people and listening to the right people, I implement it right away. Now, of course, I always do it myself. I'm not really comfortable with, doing something like a ladder drill for agility. I got to do it myself.
Sure.
And I got to, kind of master it, and then you want to show it and cue it the right way.
Yeah.
But yes, I do. And I've gotten a lot of, it's probably been the most fulfilling thing is restoring people's posture. I know that kind of sounds obscure, but we see hips or, the next time when you look at a bodybuilder, you'll see knuckles forward. That means they're protracted.
Right.
That they have thoracic rounding. You shouldn't really see your knuckles when you stand in a neutral position and relax.
Right.
Every bodybuilder, you'll see all his knuckles.
Sure.
That's bad posture.
Interesting. I think a lot of people don't pay as much attention to that until they get older, and sometimes it's already too late, or at least it's progressed so far that it's hard to kind of rein it back in.
He calls that a homeless condition. That's his term. He calls it condition 4. He has 4 different conditions, and he still, he admits that once somebody gets to that, once you have once you get joint replacement, you've changed your musculoskeletal system forever.
Sure.
It does make it a lot more difficult, but it still can improve. There still can be a functional and postural improvement.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to talk to you after the show. I want to work on getting my shoulders even. I'll get you to give me some exercises. Jimmy, this was a great conversation. I love talking to you. We'll obviously get you back again. These are very interesting conversations. I like the whole concept of exercise as we age, because now our whole generation is getting into their 50s and 60s, and I think that this is kind of more relevant for us. We're not really looking to set the world record in the squat or bench anymore. We're looking to just be functional and not to be old guys walking around all hunched over like we're half dead. Obviously, at 60 years old, you're looking really good, and I'm glad to see that everything's going well in your life.
Thank you, and you as well, that you have such a terrific family.
I just figured out, I guess when my son, who's 3 now, when I'm 60 years old, it'll be just like, I'll be like you. He'll be 13.
And you know what? You'll stay in shape, and then you watch. You're going to be sitting around a lacrosse field, and you're going to be the most fit guy, even though you think you're beat to hell. And so
I can only hope, Jimmy. Thanks so much for taking time out of your schedule. Love talking with you, Jimmy. I wish you lived around the corner. We'd be hanging out every day, I'm sure.
We'd be getting in trouble, though.
Probably, yeah.
All right, man.
All right, my friend. Take it easy. And guys, that's going to take us to the end of another episode of Live With. I'm Dave Palumbo. We'll see you next time.